Former DA youth leader and member of the KwaZulu-Natal legislature, Mbali Ntuli, has kick-started her campaign to lead the embattled opposition party. Ntuli is vying with interim leader John Steenhuisen and Gauteng leader John Moodey for the position, and she joins us now from our Durban studio. Welcome and thanks very much for taking the time to chat to us. Mbali, let me start off with this.
Thank you very much for having me.
Sorry, we've got a slight delay. I apologise for talking over you there. So in the run-up to the Federal Elective Congress, you've questioned the fairness of the virtual or the digital election process. Is that because you expect your opponents to stoop so low as vote rigging?
I think that it can never be underestimated what can happen in these particular situations. It might not be my particular opponents, it could be supporters. But even aside from that, what we have to ensure as a Democratic Alliance is that we don't come out after this election having been so bruised dismally after 2019 that we have an election that will be called into question and its legitimacy called into question. And I want to make sure that the party takes every single reasonable precaution to make sure that that doesn't happen. And if we have a voting system that is still currently so flawed that even our own campaign technology director agrees that there are ways to rig it, then we need to rectify that situation. And obviously as a candidate, I don't want to go into an election where I don't know how the votes will be allocated and whether or not everyone who's voted has actually voted and how those votes have been done.
Absolutely. But the purpose of primary debates, which you have proposed, is to highlight differences in approach between the candidates. But from your stance of renewal, will you also be looking to expose the systemic flaws of past leadership despite the damage it might cause?
I don't think it causes damage when you're open and transparent with voters. I think, in fact, what that shows is that you're authentic and that you're willing to take responsibility for the problems that have happened in the party. And I think by the regression that we saw happening in our 2019 votes, it's clear that voters are unhappy with us. And I think that any responsible leader needs to take real responsibility and accountability for what happens. And if that means that we have to say, this is where we went wrong and this is what I wouldn't do going forward, then so be it. And I don't think that that should be taken as a negative thing or negative campaigning or airing the party's dirty laundry. I think that South Africans and everybody really deserves a political party that is willing to be open and transparent. We've seen what the opposite looks like and it's not working for any of us.
Given where we are politically and where the DA voter base needs to move to, is a white male in a leadership position even an option for a party that without significant change seems doomed?
I think that anybody who's willing to be authentic and to really portray the idea of an inclusive South Africa and a party that's going to include everyone is able to lead the Democratic Alliance. I understand that racially South Africans still sometimes look to seeing somebody who might represent it in that sense. But I think that as a party and as a nation, we are beyond that in many aspects. And so I don't think that somebody's race counts fundamentally against them in any sense. But what I do think is going to be the determinant of whether South Africans trust you, and this is the important thing, is whether or not they can relate to you. And sometimes that means whether or not you are able to put yourself in the shoes of their realities. And sometimes those things come down to whether or not people understand that there are still racial inequalities in this country. I am not scared to speak about the fact that things like poverty still have a color in this country. I don't know what my opponent in the race believes entirely, but this is why I believe that it's so important for us to ventilate and to have South Africans and the party vet us fully when it comes to these things. I really don't think that race has to be the end of any discussion in terms of anyone's candidacy, but I think that you can't deny that for many people it still is an ubiquitous part of their life. And as a party, we really don't have to feel as though we have to deny this when we think about solutions about how we want to take the country and South Africa forward.
Even though you say you think the South Africans have moved past thinking about the DA in terms of race, on the ground, the DA is still referred to as the white party, despite the numbers growing of black voters who support the party. How do you look at changing that, given the party's history?
Personally, I think the only way to do it is what I did when I was in Gauteng and KZN and in the rural townships and communities that I've worked in, and that's by having a permanent presence where the community sees that you're there for them, not just during election times, but throughout the entire space between the elections, and that you actually earn their trust by delivering services to them and being with them. That is the only advantage that the ANC has over any political party in this country. When you go to any particular ward, you will find nurses, teachers, doctors, anybody who is able to hold a branch for the ANC, and that's why the ANC is able to be everywhere in this country, and despite their failures is able to still really have people on the ground level who have leaders that they believe in. I believe that as a Democratic Alliance, if we can do the same thing, which is to groom young leaders, groom leaders in these communities, find people that are respected, and really be able to train them to hold the mantle and the views of the Democratic Alliance in ways that we can help the communities, we would be in a far better place now because we would have the trust of the communities. I think that we're seen sometimes as a white party because people don't see us, and sometimes they see our leadership and don't see themselves necessarily represented as a majority. That's not to say that we are, but I do think that we have a lot of work to do by actually being in those communities ourselves and being seen all the time. And I think we've started on this process, but we can do a lot more. And now is not the time for us to be scared and to regress backwards and to try and only focus on a few minority voters that left us. I think that South Africans of all races are looking for a party that's going to be inclusive and that's going to try and take everybody on board. And that's what I want to do as the leader of the DA.
Oh, thank you very much, DA youth leader and member of the KZN legislature, Mbali Ntuli. We certainly do hope those primary debates take place.